90 seconds. That's all it took for a routine confirmation hearing to turn into a public stress test of truth itself. Because this was never just about one answer. It was about whether a future federal judge could say the most basic facts out loud when the cameras were rolling and the pressure was real. And once the questioning started, you could feel it immediately. This was one of those moments where every pause mattered, every word mattered, and every refusal said more than a direct answer ever could. You need to see this till the end. The room looked like every other Senate hearing room at first. Polished wood, nameplates, staffers leaning forward, reporters watching for a headline, cameras fixed on the witness table. The kind of room where everything is technically calm, but everybody knows one sentence can change the entire atmosphere. The nominees sat shoulder to shoulder under the lights, hands folded, posture controlled, faces trained into that careful expression people wear when they know every word may follow them for years. And across from them sat the challenger. Measured, precise, not loud at first, not theatrical, just patient. The kind of questioner who doesn't need a long speech because he already knows where the opening is. On the other side were the nominees, composed and polished, clearly prepared, clearly briefed, clearly determined not to step outside a script. At least, that's how it began. The first question sounded simple enough. Who won the 2020 election? That should have been the easiest moment of the day. A factual question, a name, a 2-second answer. Instead, the nominee reached for process. The Constitution, the Electoral College, certification by Congress, technical language, safe language, language designed to move around the question without ever touching it. And that's when the room shifted. Then everything changed. The senator cut through the explanation immediately. Not who was certified, not what the process says. Who won? Short, clean, direct. And the nominee still would not say it. She circled back to the Constitution, back to certification, back to procedure. The kind of answer that sounds official until you realize it avoids the one thing everyone in the room understands perfectly well. She paused. The room went silent. Not normal silence, heavy silence. Because now everybody could see the shape of what was happening. This wasn't confusion. It wasn't uncertainty. It was resistance. Deliberate resistance. So the senator opened the first piece of the trap. He brought up her own public words. A January 6 post. One line, sharp as a blade, a certified lie is still a lie. Suddenly this wasn't just a nominee refusing a clean answer. Now there was a document, a statement, a record, something she had already said in public that framed exactly why she was dodging now. The senator didn't have to raise his voice. He just laid it there and let the contradiction breathe. Who won the election? He asked again. Let me make it more specific. Who won the popular vote? Still no answer. More constitutional language, more distance, more evasion. That was the pause that told you everything. Because when someone cannot answer the simple version and cannot answer the more specific version, the audience stops listening to what they're saying and starts listening to what they're avoiding. Then came the second reveal. The senator pivoted to 2024. Same topic, same structure, same kind of question. And suddenly the answer came easier. President Trump was certified. Congress certified the winner. The formula was still there, but the asymmetry was obvious now. One election was too dangerous to name plainly. The other was safe enough to discuss. That contrast hit the room harder than any accusation could. And then he tightened the trap. If Trump won in 2024, how did Trump lose in 2020? No room left now. No abstract theory to hide inside. Just a contradiction sitting in plain view. She went back to Article II. Again. That's when the exchange stopped feeling like a hearing and started feeling like a documentary scene where the audience already knows the answer, but keeps watching to see whether the person on screen will finally say it. He moved to the next question. January 6, was the United States Capitol attacked? Another simple question. Another chance to step out of the fog. Another refusal. Not a yes. Not a clear description, just condemnation of violence. Careful wording. Controlled wording. Wording that acknowledged chaos without naming the event. And that silence came back. Not normal silence, heavy silence. Because everyone knew what the videos showed. Everyone knew what happened in that building. Everyone knew the country watched it live. And yet the word attack had suddenly become radioactive. The senator didn't stop there. He turned to the next nominee, then the next, then the next. One by one he ran the same test. Who won the 2020 election was January 6, an attack on the Capitol. And one by one, the answers came back in the same strange rhythm. Process, certification, violence occurred, ongoing debate. Anything except the plain, ordinary language the public would use without hesitation. That was the moment the script became visible. These weren't isolated stumbles. These were coordinated evasions. You could hear it in the repeated phrasing. You could hear it in the identical structure. You could hear it in the way each answer tried to sound neutral while refusing to acknowledge reality. The senator said what everyone watching was already thinking. The answers sounded canned, pre-rehearsed, Orwellian. If this matters to you, like this video right now, because moments like this tell you far more than prepared opening statements ever will. Then came the one break in the pattern. Another nominee was asked the same question: who won the 2020 election? And this time, finally a name: President Biden. Just like that, the spell broke for a second. One direct answer, one factual answer, and that single response made every dodge around it look even worse, because now the room had proof that a plain answer was possible. It could be said. It would not end the hearing. The ceiling would not cave in. The only thing stopping the others was choice. But the tension wasn't over. The questioning kept moving, and every refusal after that felt heavier. One nominee would say there was violence. Another would say characterization was controversial. Another would retreat into constitutional mechanics. By now, the pattern was complete. It wasn't just about elections anymore. It was about independence, about judgment, about whether someone seeking a lifetime seat on the bench could resist pressure, think clearly, and say what is plainly true without checking first whether the truth is politically safe. You could see the frustration building, not wild frustration, controlled frustration, the kind that gets colder, sharper, more dangerous. The senator looked down the table and did something devastatingly simple. He pointed out that the answers were not just evasive, they were repetitive. So repetitive, he said, that he was disappointed they weren't even more original in how they avoided reality. That line landed. Because ridicule, when it's earned, can hit harder than anger. And then came the payoff. He said the answers were an insult to the committee, an insult to the process. But more than that, he said they showed something deeper, a complete lack of independence, backbone, and impartiality, the very qualities required of a federal judge. In other words, the issue was no longer the election question by itself. The election question had become the test. And in his view, they had failed it in public. No shouting, no chaos, just the cold release of tension when everyone in the room understands the point has already been made. Here's what made the exchange so powerful. The key evidence wasn't hidden in some secret file. It was right there in the nominee's own words. First, the refusal to say who won in 2020, then the willingness to discuss 2024 through the same constitutional framework. Then the inability to call January 6 what millions watched unfold. And sitting over all of it was that earlier public statement about a certified lie, hanging in the air like a signature at the bottom of a contradiction. That's why the moment stuck, because the hearing exposed something larger than partisan disagreement. It exposed how power teaches people to speak in ways that sound legal, sound careful, sound respectable, while still avoiding the truth everyone can see. And when that happens in a confirmation hearing for judges, the stakes feel different, higher, more permanent. Afterward, this was the kind of exchange that doesn't stay inside the hearing room. It travels. Clips get replayed. Commentators split into camps. Supporters call it unfair. Critics call it disqualifying. And ordinary viewers, the ones who don't memorize Senate procedure or judicial doctrine, walk away remembering one simple thing. Several people were asked basic factual questions, and several of them would not answer plainly. That's the whole story, and that's the contradiction at the center of it. If the facts are simple, why make the language so complicated? If independence matters, why do the answers sound rehearsed? And if someone wants the public to trust their judgment from the bench, what does it mean when they cannot say out loud what the public already knows? That's why this hearing hit so hard, not because of a dramatic outburst, because of the opposite. Because the most revealing moments were the pauses, the deflections, the careful phrases, the visible effort not to cross an invisible line. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. If you want more courtroom and hearing moments like this, subscribe and follow, because the next story is even more unbelievable. Another calm, Persetu. RAL exchange, where one tiny question blew straight through the prepared script and left the entire room frozen.